Well, it's been 2 tumultuous weeks for Nyeri. Once again, they've been launched into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons with respect to those male genital mutilation incidents that have happened. Again, bringing to sharp focus the issue of gender-based violence, specifically violence against men in the home. Is it symptomatic of something else? Of course, Nyeri perhaps is just a microcosm of what is going on in the country. And with us to discuss this very important issue is Ken Jiru from the Ungwana Institute. And later on, thanks for joining us, Ken, first of all. And later on, we're hoping to be joined by Elizabeth Muvoni. She's from the Nyeri Young Women Empowerment Initiative, as well as Dr. Lukoya Tuoli, who we're hoping will join us. We're being told that we're having a few issues with Kenya Power cutting off the power in some parts of Eldoret. Hopefully we get it back in time for us to have a discussion with a perspective from a psychiatrist. But Ken, let's start with you. When you saw what happened over the past 2 weeks in Nyeri, what struck you about those incidents? And I'm talking here about the wider context of what's been going on in Nyeri first.
Yes. I think what struck me, first of all, was the inhumane nature of the act. Because many times you know, when things like that happen, I try and imagine the state of mind of the person who's doing it. And what was even stranger was a photograph I saw of the same lady being taken to court, and she seemed to have a smile on her face. But apart from that, for me, I think it's indicative of a social, what I may call a social cultural order that seems to be coming apart, you know, from the seams, where you know, the domestic problems are resolved in such a violent manner. And indeed, apart from the fact that we are seeing in Nyeri, you know, the mutilation of the male genitals, they have vicious, violent incidences across the country, meaning that the family unit is basically under siege. But even having said that, you'll then quickly look at even statistics and start seeing how many single parent families you know, we are seeing. Of course, not just ladies. Most of them are, you know, young, female led, but there are also men increasingly who are raising up their kids. And so the question that then comes to the center is what is happening to the family system unit, and why is this happening? But again, having said that, we then also appreciate the fact that we do recognize the importance of the family, first of all from a traditional perspective, but even most fundamentally the new constitution, Kenya Constitution 2010, in chapter 4, article 45, recognizes the family unit as the natural and fundamental unit of society, and the necessary unit of social order. Yeah, and I think that is very fundamental. It also says that the state actually has the duty to recognize it and to protect it. So we even constitutionally, you know, appreciate this, and you then, you know, open your ears to hear whether anybody is talking about protecting the, you know, the family through unit, these whole conversations. You don't hear. The only thing we hear about is devolution, and maybe I could put it in a way that would make possibly the politicians sit up, because I think the family unit is the smallest unit of devolution. When the family is not working, devolution will not work. And for me, and you know, sometimes when I say this, people don't see what I'm saying. If you want to know how significant family is, I invite people to look at, for instance, the Asian family system in Kenya today. We all know it's not that they don't have problems. They have their own problems just like we have our own problems. But they have somehow managed to keep themselves together, to keep themselves working together. The brothers working together, going to one factory. And basically, as we are running around as Africans shouting, you know, pesa mashinani, I have not seen any Asian, you know, shouting pesa mashinani. And I also, by the way, had occasion of talking to about 7,000 youth towards the end of last year. there were 2,000 in Kisumu, there were 3,000 in Nairobi, 2,000 in Mombasa. And every time I asked whether there's an Asian young man or lady there, there wasn't. And I was and I was asking them, hawazai wanasema wanaza. And I say the reason why that happens is not because they don't necessarily have poor people, but it is because the family unit and by extension their community is coherent and is working the way it should.
All right, Ken, let's bring in Elizabeth Muthoni now. She can join us from our Nyeri studios. Of course, Elizabeth Muthoni is an activist with the Nyeri Young Women's Empowerment Initiative. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We've just been speaking about the disintegration of the family unit. Speak to us about the pressure on the woman in Nyeri that would lead perhaps to some of the incidents that we've been seeing, male genital mutilation and other acts of violence against men in that home setting. Elizabeth.
Okay, good evening. My name is Elizabeth Muthoni. I'm from Nyeri County. Yes, I'm here to discuss the incidences of gender-based violence which have been happening in Nyeri.
Yes, Elizabeth.
What I'd like to first say is that I want to defend the women of Nyeri. The cases that have been happening are a few isolated cases. It's not that it's something which happens every day.
Well, let's speak.
So what I would like to say.
Yes. Go ahead.
Is that the women in Nyeri are really empowered, and they've been brought up in a system where they're told to do everything if their husbands are not capable of doing it. And they end up trying to be super mamas.
But isn't that pointing to there being a problem in the social order, that if women are so empowered, as you put it, that there's no place for the man?
Not really. What happens is that we always give them a chance to prove their capability. Yes, but unfortunately, at times they don't match up. And at that point is where we end up doing what they're supposed to be doing. We take it up.
Why is the man not doing his job, as you say? What's the reason for that, Elizabeth? Why is the man not performing according to what you've seen?
Again, as women from Nyeri, we are hardworking, and we've been brought up to, we've been socialized in a way that, like, if the man is not capable of doing it, I take it up myself. And we end up giving them so much leeway, they don't take up the responsibility.
But why isn't the man taking responsibility? I'm trying to get to the reason why that family unit isn't working. Yes, the woman may be empowered, but why isn't the man working? There must be reasons for this.
No, I think we've given, again, as I've said, we've given them so much leeway. Most of them end up being quite irresponsible. They end up drinking.
All right, let me bring you back into this discussion. Of course, Elizabeth saying that women have been socialized in Nyeri to be able to act a certain way and to pick up the slack where men have sort of let them down. But isn't there an underlying issue here when we speak about men in Nyeri and men in different parts of the country with respect to performance of their duties in the home, at work, and generally in society?
I think there's a deeper underlying issue. It's not as simple as Muthoni is saying that, you give people, she's saying you give them, the rope and they hang themselves.
Yes.
I think it is much, it's deeper than that. We're talking about a sociocultural order, if I may go backwards, almost more than 100 years ago when the male was the dominant guy and colonialism came and we were put apart. The cultural structures as we know them were basically put apart. And systematically what has been happening, if you put a dipstick into the historical context, there's been a lot of women empowerment, and which is based on the basic thinking that men are basically empowered already. All right, and so that has happened consistently over the years, to the extent that today you have a women fund and you have a youth fund. All right, so that when a man is gets to the age of 35, basically the state generally I think it just generally believes that by the time you're 35 then you should have made it as a man.
You should have sorted yourself out.
I have never forgotten a particular incident which really left me thinking. I met this gentleman who lives in Kangemi, And he told me, Njiru, serikali nataka kutumaliza. In the previous government, when the Youth Women Fund was set up, I asked him why. And he says, serikali inapatia bibi yangu mikopo. Akitaka mikopo ya kufanya kazi anapata, na wanashikana wanawake na wana miradi yao. Watoto wangu minafurahi wanapatiwa free primary education. Mimi najaribu kutafuta kazi sioni. And then he says, nikikuja nyumbani, bibi yangu anaambia watoto, yeye ana hiyo pesa ametoa kwa mradi yake, you know, kwa minajili, you know, the way he's been, you know, she's been helped by the government. And then he says, lakini anaambia watoto wangu waniulize chakula. And so he says that he's reduced actually to making sure that he comes home when the children are asleep,
so that he
and leaving early, so that the kids don't ask for something.
You can avoid those kinds of questions.
Yes, and to go and look for work. And indeed, if you look at all the slums in this city today, you will notice that majority of the people walking to industrial area are men, and more often than not, they'll go and not find a job and come back home in the evening. All right, and again, that then talks to even the whole question of crime. I mean, it is being committed by young men, many of them who possibly are, many of them, by the way, coming from dysfunctional families again, right? So that at the end of the day, it starts becoming a vicious cycle. And I'm asking myself, in fact, the other day, I was just thinking to myself and saying, maybe these two funds, Youth Fund and Women Fund, should be called a family business fund. Because whichever way you look at it, by the way, again, if you look at the history of you know, the economic order, you'll find that it is actually families and business, family business units that fundamentally transform societies. So I think we need to think about re-engineering society socially. And again, when we go back to the constitution that says that the state has a duty to recognize and to support the family, then what are we saying? Is the state actually torpedoing, the family in an attempt to overcompensate? Because women over the years have said men own the land, men own the titles, men own this, men own that. But in reality, if you go out there, you find that many men are really disempowered. Again, look at the question of the boy child. Right? All of us now are talking about the franchise, so to speak, a boy child. There is so much for the girl child. What is there for the boy child? And what is going to happen, going forward if we continue now, ensuring that the boy child is left to his own device?
Twisting in the wind. Elizabeth, do you think that the boy child needs to be empowered, especially looking at the experience that you've had in Nyeri, with respect to what's been happening with the girl child? You're specifically involved in empowering women and the girl child. Do you think that there's a gap that's been left with respect to the boy child?
I have no problem with boy child empowerment, but the problem comes in, most of the organizations that are doing women empowerment are women or women-headed. So what are the men doing in response to the same problem?
Yes, that's a question I'm asking you. What needs to happen? What do you think men need to be able to do to be able to involve themselves? Because as Ken stated, and as a lot of people are starting to acknowledge now, there seems to be a challenge, a serious challenge, with the boy child in many counties. Do you think that they need to be supported in specific ways?
Yes, and what I would say is that it needs to come from the homestead first. Men need to be present in the bringing of their boys. Yes, because we find men from this region are so absent outside there looking for money.
So you think...
And this happens at the expense of their families.
All right, what are the other indicators then that men aren't performing their duties in Nyeri, Elizabeth?
We can point to the recent stories. We've had so many stories being told about Nyeri that men are just out there drinking. Every time you have stories about illicit brew, it's only men who are shown.
All right.
Yes.
That brings us to an issue that we're going to be discussing. Carol Nyeri has prepared a report from Nyeri about that, and one of the issues that's raised is alcoholism. Alcoholism, Ken, is it a symptom or is it the disease itself?
I think alcoholism is a symptom. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of men generally, if I may put it that way, and young people, actually in particular, who no longer know themselves, who no longer have a sense of identity. And by the way, to also a large extent, and I will agree with Mudhoni, I think the men have a duty to lead themselves. I think, and many times I say, even the type of crisis you're seeing, whether it's political, it's men, right, doing the wrong things at the wrong time, in the wrong manner. And so to that extent, for me, alcohol is like an escape. All right, but I want us to, I think, try and think through, again, like I said, the socio-economic order that seems to suppress that guy to the extent that he feels that there is no way out for me.
Emasculation.
Which again, yes, emasculation, which again points to the question of leadership. You know, when the people lack a vision, they perish. And so what we find, I don't think, I have not heard, like I'm saying, I really have not heard any political leader talking about the family.
Yeah.
Even the church, by the way, fundamentally is beyond, you know, occasionally it will come and start talking about, you know, the natural unit is a family unit, you know, same-sex marriages. Outside that, nobody is really going out of their way to say, how should a family look? And how should we protect families?
And how should a family function?
How should a family function? For instance, should we have policies that would say at least the government should make sure at least one parent possibly is employed, or at least one parent gets a loan, whether it's a man or a woman, to help that family, so that we are focusing on the family unit as opposed to an amorphous whole. All right? And so for me, I am clear, by the way, alcoholism is a symptom of the disease, and it must be addressed. And again, I'm happy that many times, by the way, or rather, let me say, I congratulate women, because many times it's actually the women going out to pour the alcohol.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing that they are doing. And again, I'll challenge Muthoni. It is not just for the men to wake up. I think they have a duty. You know, it has been said, and sometimes I'm starting to doubt whether that statement really holds, you know, 100%. But it has been said many times that when you educate a woman, you educate society. But we are increasingly seeing empowered women isolating themselves from the men and saying you can go to hell, rather than understanding that if there's a problem with the male, then she also has a duty to help this male.
Yeah.
Rather than say, you men, get up, and when you don't get up, then we're empowered, we do what we must do. I don't think that's the way we'll build a society.
Let's take that challenge to Nyeri. Elizabeth, you've heard what Ken has said. Do you think that women are isolating men in their search for empowerment, in their search for equality? This is a discussion we've had many times on Checkpoint. Do you think that women are isolating men in their search for equality?
To some extent, I would say yes.
Why so?
Because, like you consider what I've said earlier, that when, like, for example, if a woman approaches the husband, he's unable to perform certain responsibilities, and she takes it up herself,
Yes.
What happens is, instead of the woman asking the man, what do you have to bring on the table? And I bring the rest on the table. What happens is the woman ends up taking it up herself, alone.
Yes, but what can the woman do to ensure that the problems that men are facing, the emasculation that we've talked about, the alcoholism that they find themselves engaged with, what can women do? You're in an organization that empowers women. Do you ever have this discussion about being able to elevate and bring up the man and the boy child in Nyeri?
Okay, what we are doing in my organization,
yes,
we are having brainstorming sessions with women, whereby, okay, much as we are empowering them, we also need to approach it from a point of view of empowerment versus responsibility.
Yes, but we've seen that men have abdicated their responsibilities in many respects in Nyeri by going into alcohol, into drinking dens, engaging in alcoholism, not going to their work, not taking up their responsibilities. What in your brainstorming sessions has been the answer about why the men are doing it? Not what they are doing, but rather why it is that they are doing it, and how to be able to resolve this for those men.
We need to involve them in family development as opposed to leaving them out. Because once we leave them out, we leave them so much leeway, and know so much of their resources are spent on alcoholism. Because we don't give them time to contribute, neither do we give them space to contribute.
Okay, all right. Elizabeth, we'll get back to you in a moment. Ken as well. We've got a story from Carol Nyeri on the same, pointing to some of the factors just before we continue and wind up our discussion about alcoholism, about some of the factors that perhaps aren't coming out with respect to what's going on in Nyeri.
Now, alcoholism has borne the brunt of blame, right, left and center whenever the question arises, why are the men in Nyeri County supposedly under siege? That those who are allegedly battered by their significant other are often too inebriated to even realize the happenings around them. Protests, especially by women, are not uncommon, and a section of residents in Chaka this week said they had had enough of their sons always being in a drunken stupor while abdicating their roles as real men.
Watoto yetu manakunywa pombe hiyo ya haramu, makikuja nyumbani manalala nje kwa maana haiwezi kuingia kwa nyumba, manakojoa manakojolea nguo yao.
Wakienda Kwale wanapewa shilingi 100, anakibiria tu hapa kwa hii Chang'aa na kunywa.
8 bars in Kieni East have since been closed, according to Deputy County Commissioner James Chacha.
Nauliza wananchi wale ambao wanatengeneza Chang'aa huko ndani, report hizo cases kwetu mara moja.
Following the recent cases of gender-based violence meted out on men here, therefore sparking a heated debate on social platforms, the question that begs is this: has the girl child been empowered at the expense of the male child?
And another thing that women in Nyeri have been brought up to know is that, like for example, if something cannot be done at family level, I do it myself, I take it up myself.
Unaona msichana, they are so much empowered to an extent of forgetting that the design of God is that a man should not live alone.
We are marching to reach our goals.
Some educationists would argue that for starters, there are more girls' schools than boys' schools in this particular region.
So as you realize, within Laikipia and the Central, many schools are opting to have only the girl child, and in many cases you find that they are phasing out the boys.
Kenya National Union of Teachers Nyeri Branch Executive Secretary Mutahi Kahiga feels that it is time to go back to the basics as guided by the African culture, where the emphasis was on molding the boy child and his roles and responsibilities taught to him and outlined clearly.
How many schools go on strike? You realize that boy schools end up going on more strikes than the girls.
He thinks the woman in central Kenya has become disillusioned.
The woman is doing too much, has taken over even the roles that belong to the man. And I can see the woman just getting disillusioned too and wondering of what value is this individual to me? Because it can't be just baby making.
The spotlight has also been shown on the role of the church.
The boy has gotten lost somewhere because he's got a Christian name. He's got a Christian initiation. He's got a Christian marriage. And the end result is that he gets a Christian burial. That's okay. That's how we are putting it. But all along it all, we are taking him to heaven and forgetting that he is living on earth.
I would rather talk more about the boy in the Bible who is older than the Kikuyu boy. And the boy in the Bible was supposed to be modeled, circumcised and helped by the big boy.
There is a general feeling that there is a real need to go back to the drawing board in a bid to mend the torn social fabric.
The way we are raising our children, in some cases, we are empowering our girls so much, which is okay, and we tell them, usisubuliwe na mwanaume, kwani mwanaume anakusaidia nini? Huh?
Opinion would be, even in a situation where there is a single parent, let us look for that mentorship within either the family. There are uncles, there are others who would come in and be the role models. Let's have these boys attached to individuals who will mentor them.
And while there are many organizations that lobby for the girl child, it could be said that there are not as many that stand in for the boy. The few that do, well, Maendeleo Wanaume's Nderitu Njoka laments that he has been a subject of ridicule every time he campaigns for the boy.
What they do is to encourage me because I speak something different. It's not just about a man's issue. Women are also agitated by their fellow women, what they are doing.
He is a son of Nyeri and certainly believes that there is a problem that needs to be dealt with, and insists that nothing will come in his way of speaking for the males who society tends to think are not vulnerable.
I don't care whether people ridicule me. Even Jesus was sacrificed. Jesus Christ was sacrificed because he came to save people.
2 years ago, Njoka issued a red card to women who were violating their men. He says that obviously did not work, and the perpetrators have left him no choice but for his organization to seek an amendment in the Sexual Offences Act.
Cut chopping off someone's penis or genitals is attempted murder, and one cannot continue. It's a matter of life and death.
Hata wao wanafanya vibaya kwa sababu hata wao wanafanya kazi kama Al-Shabaab. Naweza kuwaambia wasikaje kufanya namna hii kwa sababu watoto wote watakwisha na Kenya yenyewe haitakuwa iko na watu.
Concerted efforts from stakeholders ought to be employed so as to solve this crucial matter once and for all.
Oh Lord, bless our teachers. Oh Lord, bless our parents. Forever to our destiny.
Carol Derek-Katian, Nyeri County.
Global view of what's been happening in Nyeri County. Of course, this is a national issue that men have been having problems in different parts of this country and are unable to perform their duties, and this is leading to the disintegration of the family unit, as we've discussed, Ken. Now, let's move forward to solutions. We've spoken about how important the family unit is in the Constitution. What can I do as a person who's watching this from the sidelines to be able to ensure that this doesn't happen in my county, in my community?
First of all, I think within the respective communities, we need to relook at what I may call our philosophical mainsprings, meaning we need to think through who we are as a people, what we stand for, what we believe in, and what we value. You see, because if we say then we value family, then we will start focusing on family as a unit. I don't know whether you must have watched mafia movies. The family, you know, they will kill you just before stepping out of line. And indeed, when you look at even communities like the Jews, it is they do their business on the basis of family. But the reason they do that is because they value family. But think about the sociocultural thinking that we have right from the time the Muzungu walked in. What do? We educate our kids and then kick them out, tell them go and get a job. Like I said, the Asian community educates their kids and then most of them work, you know, for them and build families. So that you will see, for instance, a family business like you know, with my friend Vimal Shah, or the Pauranas running a river mining, and you can replicate them across this country. And more often than not, if you look at African families, when a doyen dies with his millions, then the next thing that happens is guys are in court, they are fighting, they are trying to discover what their father had, and it becomes one big messy thing. I think the what we are calling council of elders and you know, institutions like that should be institutions that are now systematically looking at these things and asking themselves, how do we protect that family? How do we go back to the basics? Again, more fundamentally at the level of the state, we have a ministry called the Ministry of Sports, Culture and Arts. And sometimes when I look at that ministry, I tell myself culture is boxed inside there because we don't really appreciate what culture means. In fact, for me, culture should be one of the most significant ministries in any nation, because culture, by definition, simply means the way we do things around here, the way we work, the way we give birth, the way
way of life.
You know, is our way of life. And so it is very significant. And so the Ministry of Culture should be, I think, it should be the ministry that is running, you know, with these basic issues. But at a personal level, where we're talking about John Allan Namu and his family as a man. First of all, I believe every faith, assuming, you know, we all come from some faith or other, actually states what a man should basically do. And I like my friend Pastor Mbevi, you know, he talks about, you know, boys to men, you know, and he talks about the role of the man, the role of the father. And by the way, I want to emphasize something that is very significant, because I have seen it across this country. Women may think, and there are some women who say we don't need men, but more often than not, the minute you have a single a parent who is a lady trying to raise boys, there is always something that goes wrong. You know, there is an identity crisis. They don't become the men they are supposed to be, and somewhere down the line it becomes chaotic. In fact, at some point in time, the mothers and the fathers can't even control them. But even from a family perspective, what I would like even to see more are family structures that start appreciating that as a family unit, you need even your own core set of values. You know how you have values at KTN? Core set of values as a family.
You need values
what do we
whole.
stand for? I remember as we grew up, I would try and do something, and my late father would tell me, Ken, nobody has ever done this in our family. Today, I'm not sure that most of our generation, especially us, can tell our kids nobody has ever done this in our family, because then what is family? What are our values? All right. And so I think the whole question of family vision, I think the whole question of we, when I listen to Mudhoni out there, she's saying I. Again, I want you to imagine KTN. I'm sure teamwork is one of your values here. If you're not talking about teamwork in KTN, and John Allan Namu is knocked into shape every other time he wants to get out of line, is taken for team building exercises, then you would not be able to work the way you're working.
All right.
So that is important.
All right. Speaking of Mudhoni, I'm going to give you the last word, Mudhoni. It's a week away from Father's Day. What do people in Nyeri, what do people across the country need to be able to do to ensure that this social crisis comes to an end?
Thanks again. I would like to call on the religious leaders and the local leaders, whether political or administrative leaders, to reach out to young women and talk to them, especially counseling them, and also the women, and tell the young girls and the young women that we need to sit down and share responsibilities with our husbands. We cannot do it alone.
All right. Thank you very much, Elizabeth Mudhoni from the Nyeri Young Women's Empowerment Initiative. And, of course, joining us in studio is Ken Jiro from the Ungwane Institute. Dr. Lukoya Atwoli unfortunately couldn't join us. Power issues, Kenya Power failed us in Eldoret. Hopefully we'll be able to have him on for another discussion. Checkpoint, keep your feedback coming with respect to this discussion, what the role of the man is, whether he's been emasculated. We'll sample some of your feedback towards the end of this bulletin.